Hi, I'm Karan Soni, and I'm an actor, director, writer, producer, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing."
Welcome everyone to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. I can already tell this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really, really thrilled to be joined by Karan Soni. Karan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for pronouncing my name with such vigor and accuracy.
Yes, you know what? That's right. Vigor and accuracy are both to be had today. I'm just excited that we can pronounce both of our names actually with vigor and
Yes,
accuracy,
there
which is
you
great.
go.
I have to tell you first off, I think we both share something in common in that we are both, I don't know if we can commiserate or we can celebrate, but we're both spouses of doctors. So
Yeah.
certainly there's a lifestyle and a secret club unto itself just of being that.
Yes. It's so interesting you said that or start with that because I grew up in India and Delhi, and the profession of doctor, at least from my perspective, growing up there was not as revered as it is in America for
Sure.
Indians.
Right.
Because we just had like a family doctor who we would just go to. He had his own clinic, and it was just very much like that was another job. And if anything, growing up, business and economics, those jobs like CEOs were more revered in
Yeah.
Delhi more than a doctor, even. So then when I came to America, and every South Asian person is kid or parent it was such a fascinating thing to be like, oh, this is what has brought so many people of a certain generation over to America because they were encouraged to come here with that profession. And
Yeah.
then there's such a respect for it and in a different way. But since dating my partner who is a doctor, I've been into that world a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's a really fascinating world of med school and MCAT scores and
I was going to
everything
say,
in
you're
between.
already speaking all the right language words, right? Like,
Yes.
I do have a bone to pick with you, though. I was just telling you that I'm from up here in Berkeley, and I know you're down in LA. But as a lifelong LA guy and a Dodger fan, I was dismayed to see you in a Deadpool San Francisco Giants jersey. I mean, I get the
Okay.
Marvel promotion and all, but come on, man,
Yeah.
that's just wrong.
Well, I don't know if this will make you feel better or make everyone hate me. Either way, I didn't even know what the Giants were, if that's fair. Because I did not grow up with the sport. So I just got an email being like, they want you to come to this game. And I had to literally Google, is that football? Is that base? Which one is that? So yeah, I really don't have strong loyalties with that. But I will say I did once film at Dodger Stadium. We got to film on the field. I did a guest star on this episode of this Fox TV show called Touch that was set
Yeah.
in New York, and it was Dodger Stadium, but they were pretending it was Yankee Stadium. And the episode is very dramatic. My character's father has died, and he was a huge Yankees fan. And I've
Yeah.
flown to America, and I want to pour his ashes onto the stadium grounds. And I break through security and do all this stuff. And to shoot the show shot in LA, so we shot it at Dodger Stadium. So I got to be on the field and spread fake ashes for a few hours, which was very cool.
I'm hearing this, and yes, all is forgiven, especially because there's some sort of reverence at Dodger Stadium that's there. And I'm so fascinated by your work, and especially your work on screen is just so endearing and funny and likable. And I know many have written about lots of other superlatives in there as well. I'm wondering, with that multitude of personas that are there, but particularly those words of being likable and being relatable and endearing, I'm wondering if there's also a sort of versatility built into that, or if at all there is a craving for roles that speak to a lot of other reactions or emotions from people. For you in your career, is there something there that you feel is beyond just the typecasting, or
Mhm.
something that you crave when it comes to your new work now?
Yeah, I feel so lucky because I feel like I've been able to do such a variety of things. It's always interesting though when you're doing press or interviews because I think as of today, I think I have 109 credits or something like that over film
Yeah.
and television. And what's interesting is like the things that pop are not the ones you have control over. Like certain things people have seen a lot of, and then they think you've only done that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, if you look at it, to me, I feel very satisfied, I guess, in my career because I've gone to do so many different things.
Yeah.
But all of it is interesting to me because I originally, I think, was fascinated and attracted to this profession for two reasons. One was superficial, which I'm very honest about, which was it seemed like a glamorous life.
Yeah.
It's not that glamorous in many ways, as you come to learn very quickly and brutally in Los
Mm.
Angeles when you're
Yeah.
trying to enter this business with no connections and no family members and you don't look white. So
Right.
that's a
There's
whole other
that.
thing.
Yeah.
There's that thing. But there was like a draw with that a little bit to it where it felt like this profession where you're accepted publicly. And as someone who grew up in the closet and had all these issues with like being accepted in a way, I was drawn to, I think, that part of it. But the other part that I think really hooked me on it when like I got bit by the bug, as a lot of actors say, and you like kind of have the thing is I usually in my everyday life have a hard time expressing my feelings, and I express limited feelings. Like I don't express anger, jealousy, a lot of these emotions enough. And so what's great about acting is that you can pretend, but you're still using all your real emotions, but they're in a safe environment almost. It's almost like you're getting angry, but like it's safe and allowed and all of those things. So in a way, I feel like I've been able to express every part of myself in different things all the time, which is really, really fun. Overall, I just am currently in a place of just pure gratitude. I feel like I've gotten to do so much. When I initially came out here in 2007, the only person I knew on TV was Cal Penn. That was the only face
Hmm.
that penetrated to India. Harold and Kumar was the only thing. And I remember walking around USC and there was a poster for Aziz Ansari because he was hosting the MTV Movie Awards. And I just remember stopping and being like, who's this? Like I was just
Right.
shocked.
Yeah.
And I think Parks and Rec or something had just come out or something like that. And so, you know, at a time when I arrived, there was no real career prospects or longevity realistically, but I was also 18 years old and not really thinking about the future. I was sort of
Yeah.
just like, it'd be cool to be in one thing. It was like as far as like my brain went. And so in a way, I'm so grateful for that because I think if I was more practical, I would have maybe self-sabotaged a little and
Right.
remove myself from the game. But I think back now at that time, and I think to now 2025 and this new movie that just came out, and I just think like, oh my god, like I could have never imagined I would have been able to do all this stuff. And then the likable part, it's just interesting, but I think with on camera acting, you can only change, I believe, yourself so much. Ultimately, people are falling for your essence because the camera picks up everything. And there's huge exceptions. Like I would say someone like Daniel Day-Lewis or Meryl Streep, the select few, I would say, not most actors, have this way of manipulating us so much that they can make you believe anything. But I would say
Yeah.
majority of actors, the camera, it's the pros and cons of the camera. It's so intimate that it is actually showing an essence of who you are. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's what makes each actor unique because a part of you is always there, whether you're pretending to be someone very different or not.
Yeah.
And if that's the essence that's coming out, I'm happy about that, then that's totally fine.
It's it, hey, yeah, and it's interesting, right? I mean, like that versatility that you speak of, where you've had all of these things, and yet it does meld back into the essence of who you are, what gets portrayed on the camera, and you can take bits and pieces away, either as an audience member or in real life when you're working with other actors. I imagine that presence certainly evokes a lot of feelings of gratitude, but I imagine that there is some liberation with that as well. Like you said, like you have trouble expressing your feelings, perhaps,
Yes.
in person, but then, you're in this space where now the camera sort of liberates all of that. And I'm wondering for you, you've been an actor and a producer and a director, and different roles demand different sort of timing and spaces and functionality. Is there a different kind of liberation that comes from each of those discreetly, or does it still all kind of blend into sort of the professional space of trying to create something? I'm
Yeah.
just curious, what differences maybe you felt, particularly both in the versatility of all those roles, but then also in the different spaces where you've existed as an actor, producer, or director.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I would say I stereotypically am not the actor's personality, which
Hmm.
the stereotype is the emotions are right at the surface and can come out at any time. Like actors feel sort of everything. I actually have to actively force them to come out sometimes because my body
Okay.
naturally wants to suppress them.
Yeah.
And then the other stereotype is that actors aren't good with money or time or organizing. And they're just these creative spirits. And it's definitely true for a lot. I'm not those things. I'm actually so organized. I'm very good with money. I'm like, tax season is like good for me. Like I feel at peace. Like I have all my documents always organized. Anytime I go to like my tax person, initially
You're
they
like
said,
revved up.
yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm like, everything is
Yeah.
like color coded. And so what's interesting about the other jobs, the behind the camera jobs, is a lot of them are about time management, because everything in film is very expensive. And the more you shoot, you're paying more. So if the day goes longer, it's 100 plus people overtime. It's all these issues. So much of film and TV is logistics, and the creative part of it is logistics. Like we have this location, we have these many hours, we have these many scenes. How are we going to move past? So that part of it, actually, my brain ignites in a completely different way. I love using that part of my brain. And it's almost not creative in a way. And I don't mind that. And then the on camera stuff, I actually have to shut the organized part of my brain off and be like, just feel something and just be present. And sometimes because the more I do behind the camera stuff, I start looking at the clock and I go, oh my God, we're going to run out of time. And I almost want to like get in there to the director. And I'm like, it's not my job. It's not your problem. Your problem is just to like deliver when the camera is on and do it. So in a way, the acting part is more liberating, and the behind this camera stuff, I feel almost comes easier because I love the organized part of my brain, and I love schedule and time management and all that stuff.
Do you find yourself having to, maybe because the behind this camera work is maybe more to your nature, and it sort of comes as a natural, whereas the acting part, do you find that you have to actually like focus in order to be liberated a little bit more when you're in front of the camera?
It's actually the opposite for me, which is because I'm an overthinker and over planner. If I
Ah,
focus, I actually shut myself off. So in a weird
yeah,
way, I
yeah.
have to stop futurizing and thinking about the past and literally make eye contact. It's so basic with the person in front of me and just be like, just be present here. Don't think about the next thing, the future thing.
Right.
And that in a way is very relaxing. It's almost like meditation in a weird way. It's
Yeah.
like being utterly present. And I feel like when I'm present, everything comes to the surface. But if I'm
Mm.
thinking about, overthinking like I usually am, it's just my brain is shutting down. So in a weird way, when I feel I'm the most present, it's almost like meditation, where afterwards, like a take or something, I feel relaxed, or I feel like
Yeah.
the time came and went and I didn't even realize it. And especially now we're so addicted to our phones, and I feel so depressed if I look at my phone for long periods of time. Like my body just feels bad. With
Yeah.
this, like you can't act with your phone. Like I put the phone away and it's just like very meditative. It
Mm.
feels
Yeah.
very like present and good. And so in a way, I'm drawn more to on camera because it makes me feel better. And
Sure.
the organized part of me is always working anyway. So I'm just like, in a way, this is the most relaxing to me.
Almost escaping a little bit
Exactly.
of that, and getting it out there. Each of your roles in the past, whether it's TV work or Deadpool and Marvel and the other film work or the voice work, obviously, as you mentioned, right, it's a craft. You have to prepare, requires a lot of prep and learning, and then at the same time, when you're in front of the camera, so you escape a little bit. What do you in fact have to perhaps unlearn,
Hmm.
maybe as you exit one project and move to the next? As you mentioned, sort of like it, you have to certainly like prepare in a way, but what do you also have to let go of?
That's a really interesting question. Each job, for the most part, ends up teaching you something different, whether that's just reinforcing something that already works for yourself, or whether it's like a new thing. So, like, small example, like people always ask me, like, oh, you worked with, let's say, Ryan Reynolds or something, like, what did you learn? And
Yeah.
oftentimes it's just basic practical things, because I feel like the craft of performing and acting is so personal to each person. Like, someone can be thinking of their dead mother to cry, or someone could be thinking of like lunch and they could cry. You know what I mean? So it's like, to each person, like it's so individual, you can't really explain what it is. And so that stuff, you just have to figure out for yourself like what gets you to a certain place. But the other stuff is just really practical. So I think a lot of people don't realize, I definitely didn't, in film and television, it's not about the actors like
Mm.
comfortability or schedule. So there's 100 plus people sometimes to shoot a scene with maybe one or two actors. So there's all these people setting up lights, setting up the location, doing all this stuff. So I remember once reading an interview, and this actor said, what makes a movie star is basically someone who's ready when the camera is ready to deliver whatever is needed. on whatever day. And a lot of people don't realize, like, sometimes you're shooting the final scene of the movie on the first day of the movie. You know what I mean? And it just is a matter of, like, because that worked for the schedule. It doesn't matter that it doesn't work. And you're paid essentially to be ready when they are ready, when the other machine elements are ready or whatever. So there's often like things like that of like how to practically be on a set. So those are the things I usually take from other people that I've just observed that works for them. So small thing that I took from Ryan that actually have taken for so many years and it's improved my work so much is I like to improvise a little bit when the project is right and it calls for it. I feel like it gives a more natural performance and it reads as a more real character if it's something coming out of you live in a weird way. And it ticks my other box of like writing where I feel like I'm getting to put something a little bit more in my own words. You know, Ryan is obviously very quick and everything. And I remember on the first Deadpool, my perception of him was that he just kind of is coming up with this magically on the spot. And that's usually my mindset of improv before going into that first Deadpool movie was that it's only improv if you're just coming up with it in the moment. Otherwise, it's scripted or whatever. And on the first day, I realized on his iPhone notes app, he had written all his alt improv lines. He had pre-written everything. And I just remember it blowing my mind. And eventually I had the courage to ask him about that because he would pull out his phone and the director would be like, do you want to try anything else? And he would just rattle off. Yeah. And he's, by the way, one of the fastest, quickest people anyways. But even so, he prepared and wrote some stuff. And I remember at one point, I think I asked him about it and he said, oh yeah, there's no pride in like saying you came up with it like on the moment. He was like, I have ideas all the time and I'm going to forget. The day is long. You maybe had an idea 5 weeks ago and you're not shooting the scene for another 5 weeks and you're going to forget. So you might as well have everything on there. So ever since doing that with him, I started when I think I want to improvise, I'll write. I like handwriting in the margins of the script. Sometimes just a word, sometimes a full sentence or dialogue or something. And that was such a small thing, but seeing him do it gave me permission. And now I do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It saved me so many times because, you know, sometimes you're shooting 2, 3 in the morning and you're like, your brain is not as active. But like weeks ago when I was rested and well, I had some ideas and I wrote them down. And so then I just look at the script and I go, oh, right, I wanted to try that or I wanted to do something like that. And so little things like that you take away from different people.
With that, like, you know, that's a carryover and that you said like you take away from other people. Do you have to also, you know, shed some things when you go from one space to the other and just like, you know, hey, I know that worked on that particular project, but man, this is a completely different vibe or a completely different temperature to this particular project and make sure that you're not anchored, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, especially specifically for acting, is very quickly you get on a set and you realize the director is the leader of that particular project and their style of working is what is going to be required. And for me now, I've been lucky enough to work so much. On the first day by lunch, I can tell if I'm going to have a good time or not. And then it's just
you can feel the vibe of the whole sort of deal.
And honestly, most actors we're so sensitive to that where you can, and all you're really looking for is basic leadership, which is, does someone know what they want? And are they clear and decisive with that? And the truth is when they don't know what they want, I have tried to force them into becoming more efficient or better communicators. And I've just now given up and been like, I am not going to fix this person on this project. So I go into what I call surrender mode and I just surrender. And I just have to tell myself, it's going to be really long days. There's going to be a lot of wastage of time. There's going to be moments where you will not get clear direction. Just forget that you will get that on this and just get to the end and try to have fun. And then the opposite, when there's a director who is very decisive and knows what they want, it actually, for me, makes me more creative because we're not rushing. Yeah. So there's more time to, sometimes you want to try something. There's just like a different kind of work dynamic that happens. But it usually all comes from that sort of leader. And it trickles down to every department because the director is in charge of all these other departments, the camera, everything. So if they don't know what they want from the actors, they often don't know what they want from the shots or different things. And the irony of all of it is it can be a disastrous shoot that can be rescued in the edit. Just because the shoot is going off the rails doesn't mean you might make a bad movie or TV show. So in a way, you still have to perform and give it your all because you're like, this might become something. And the opposite is also true, which makes me really sad sometimes, is the happiest sets where everyone was happy, everyone felt creative. It might not come together in the edit room and it might not be good. And so none of it really matters to what the final thing ends up being. It's more of how do I get through the process of making something. And I can very quickly sort of be like, oh, this one's going to be one where I just need to surrender, and it's not going to be smooth. It's going to be bumpy, and just put those expectations away and just try to experience it for what it is.
Yeah, just sort of being in that moment. I'm hearing you say all of this, and it strikes me that you're someone I can sense that really, really has that craving for the structure
Mhm.
and the discipline of somebody who's behind that camera and knows what they want so that you can actually create. And
Yes.
yet, I bet that over time, you've had to really flex between what is structure and then what is ambiguity
Yes.
in a project, because I'm guessing that that has taken a lot of practice to be able to become comfortable with, and like you said, get to that surrender moment. Probably something
Yes.
that's very different now versus when you were first starting out.
Yes, I think when you're first starting out, for me, I can say that part comes out, I became insecure. So when a director
Yeah.
wasn't sure, I took it upon myself and I was like, I'm bad. And very quickly you realize, oh, actually, because like in the beginning, I think you look at positions of power like the director on a set and you think, well, they have the position of power. They must know better.
Right. Right.
And so in the beginning years, I think you just I ended up personalizing a lot of that stuff out of insecurity. And I would just
Yeah.
take it as like, oh, they seem unsure because they're not happy with what I'm doing. And that means I'm the problem. And then
Mm,
that's a worse way to be, because then you're driving home from a day of work just tortured and
yeah.
not able to sleep. That
Yeah.
luckily has gone away with experience and time. It's also the good lesson in it, which is, again, it might turn out to be a really special project at the end. And in a way, just because everything is controlled and regimented doesn't mean it's going to be good.
Yeah.
So that's the weird thing about creative stuff. There's no formula to it. If there was a
Yeah.
formula, there would be a very, very, very rich people in Hollywood, but much of Hollywood is a huge gamble. You're
Mm.
rolling the dice on a bunch of creative decisions and hoping that you'll make something that people resonate with. And people are paid a lot of money to make those decisions, but people don't really know. They're often guessing what they think is going to work and not work.
And you mention all of this, and it seems like there's this kind of like excitement and anxiety that happens at the exact same time where you're like, this is such a wonderful project. And yet again, like you said, there's a risk and a gamble that's involved in just about every single project that you might be affiliated with. I'm wondering, in that same sort of vein, entertainment and acting and creativity in 2025 also presents viewers and the public
Mhm.
with a front row seat on so many different platforms and so many different social media venues, and that just sort of goes beyond what they see necessarily on the screen. And yet it's a 24-hour, 7-day, 365 process, and it leaves very little time for closed spaces, so to speak. And so you've been doing this for a while now, right? I mean, 15 years plus.
Yes.
What has being in this business now for so long taught you maybe about downtime and privacy and like closed spaces where it's like, nope, I don't need to know about the process, and I don't
Yeah.
want to constantly be part of that?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. Yeah, the downtime is a big thing because the other problem with this profession is you never really know your schedule or what's going to be happening.
Yeah.
And so you can go from quote unquote not working to then working a 16-hour day the next day. Like there's just no structure in that sense. So the downtime originally used to be this very dreaded thing. And now I can't say I'm completely cured of the dread, but I've refocused it in a way where I just have accepted that I work in a profession that's all extremes. When you're not working, you feel like you have too much time. When you're working 16, 17-hour days, you have no life outside work. And so you're always at two extremes. So in a way, the downtime, I've tried to rephrase it as literally just telling yourself, there's going to come a Monday where I'm going to look at the schedule and be like, I don't have a second to breathe this week.
Mm.
And I wish I would have had this day off, but
Yeah.
I have the day off today. And
Yeah.
in a way, I think the creative thing is so interesting because you have to recharge and refuel yourself in the downtime in order to then work the long days and be present and be ready and be willing for whatever is thrown at you. In a way, the preparation for that happens when you're not working, for myself.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
I look at that time as like a time to just kind of refill the cup. And then the other thing that is interesting that happens in that time is, for me, draw a lot from things I've seen. Like, I'm very observational. So I'll even see like a parent talk to a child or something, and it'll just clock in my head somewhere as like, oh, that was interesting. Like, that social interaction. There's something there that I would like to recreate one day if it's right or something. And that is only happening when you have time to live life and do
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And then the private and quiet space is also very important, because I feel like you end up expelling energy while working a lot. And people, it's a very social environment. People want to talk a lot. And the other crew members, interestingly, they are able to do their job quietly, technically, because we're recording sound. They're not supposed to be social. They're sort of very focused. And then in between takes, they're more socializing. In a weird way, we have to expel our energy when everyone else is quiet, because that's when we're doing the performing. So depending on what kind of, if it's a lighter movie or something, then I'm okay. Being social actually helps me to be lighter and like more kind of interacting. And then sometimes, I just did a movie last year where I played a serial killer, and I was doing some very intense scenes and killing people and do a lot of heavy emotions. And I bring a book and I just open the book and I just read. And I think it just lets people know, like, I'm not interested in talking, but hopefully not in a rude way. And also, I looking at the phone always makes me feel bad. So reading like a physical book, I find, is like my best way of being like, it just signals to everyone in a kind way, I'm not interested right now in talking. And I'm also like just calming myself down by reading. And
If we both took books right now and started reading papers to each other, would that signal some sort of kind and polite way that we needed to
yes,
pause for a
I'll
second?
slowly
Okay,
just bring the book up and cover the camera.
there you go. All right. You know, a lot of this is something that we grow into, right? We learn, we find ways to adapt, and therefore we become more comfortable in our own skin, and certainly that takes time. But you know, you're someone who grew up in India, and we were just chatting, you know, before we started about like how you've probably been here now in the States about the equivalent amount of time. And you know, in growing up in Delhi and then coming to LA and being at USC, and is there an element of India and your childhood or the way you grew up, even the components of growing up, are there elements of that you consistently get very nostalgic about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have that much nostalgia for it. I mostly feel just grateful, because I feel like I left at the age of 18. I had such a strong sense of Indian culture, at least where I grew up in Delhi and everything, and what
Yeah.
parts of it I really liked, and then what parts of it I didn't like. And
Hmm.
America, I feel like, is such a place to reinvent yourself in many ways,
Yeah.
and sort of start again the way you want to. And so I feel so lucky, because the parts that I didn't like, I was able to just reshape and live a more American life. What I noticed when I first came to school here was the Indian American experience, so many Indian American students, and understandably they felt so lost. They had one foot in the Indian culture, which to me felt so obscure, because it's something they had gotten from their parents who left at a different age. The music they listened to was so old to me, or the dishes specifically they talked about, or I was like, that's not like. And
Right.
there was such a confusion with like what they latched on, and then how American they should be, and that classic kind of battle of like where you stand, and
Yeah.
just kind of lost an identity. And then also, depending on what part of America they grew up in, how racist it was, and what part of the Indian culture they suppressed, because they were like, it's a survival technique. So to
Mm.
me, I came to Los Angeles, a multicultural place where that didn't necessarily happen. There was more curiosity about my race than discrimination. And so I felt so lucky, because I just was like, oh wow, I have these parts of myself that I like from this culture that's so rich and amazing. And then I have other parts that I can reinvent in this
Yeah.
country, which is so cool,
Yeah.
including this specific career, like, having this particular career and all of that kind of stuff. So I feel really lucky. What ended up happening for me was honestly not nostalgia in the beginning, but my obsession when I first came to LA was I only wanted to make white friends,
Mm.
because I was like, get me away from the people, because I
Right.
literally was like, I'm having this experience, I'm leaving this country, like I'm obsessed with just whiteness. And
Yeah.
it was such a
Yeah.
testament to, because I was a big fan of movies. And so what I saw in movies was white people. And so I remember coming to downtown LA and I was shocked to see signs in Spanish. And around USC at the time in 2007, not as gentrified as it is today. The grocery stores sometimes had signs in Spanish. And I just remember being like, what the hell is this? Like, I just was, and it was so interesting because they exist. And even if movies were filmed in those locations, you only saw white characters. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was such a jarring shock to be like, oh, there's so much diversity in Los Angeles. Like, I had no idea there's more Mexican food here than American food. And I remember initially coming to USC and being like, I want to hide all the Indian stuff and I just want to make white friends and be as American, quote unquote, as possible. And then I also played into this idea of if white people found any part of my culture exotic, I would play that up in order to be interesting to them. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't really know what part of the culture at that point I still enjoyed for myself. I just remember if they found it interesting, I would bring it up. And if they
Mm,
didn't, then I would be like, yeah, it's not that interesting. And it was
right.
all dependent on them. And then as I went further into Hollywood and stuff, I think that problem got worse because at the time when I started, there was major scarcity mentality amongst
Yeah.
people of color. Because the truth was, you were often always meeting other brown actors in an audition room and you were all competing for the same small part. And so there was this constant sense, oh my God, this person is here. And looking at the other person from your own race as competition always is not a good feeling.
Right.
And so
Right.
there was no sense of like, I'm interested in their experience or any of that. And then luckily, I came into this business at a time when it's opening up a little bit more and there's better opportunities. And suddenly I remember having the experience of working with another brown actor in the same scene. And it sounds
Mm,
so small, but it goes from seeing someone who looks like you as competition to a coworker. And it's a completely different paradigm change. And I remember feeling so comfortable on the set being like, oh, I don't have to play this game of like, what the white people like about Indian culture. We're just
right.
naturally connecting about what we like about that stuff. And that then allowed me to sort of be like, okay, what do I really like and what do I miss and what do I not miss? And now I feel like I have a very healthy kind of sense of that.
Mm,
But I don't miss living back there or living in India or any of that stuff. I actually feel like I found the perfect balance here where I feel like I have my right independence and I have the parts of the culture that I love with me still.
yeah. And, when you mention, look, I really just want to be with white people.
Yes.
And then you get this sort of jarring reality of what Los Angeles and the experience is like and how diverse it is. And yet when you now are in a business where there is some labeling
Yes.
of what is it that you do and who you are,
Yeah.
those tags of being an Indian American or an
Hmm.
Indian or a South Asian American, do those labels make sense to you? Do they make you proud or do they make you indifferent? Are they just extras out
Yeah.
there? And
Yeah.
especially nowadays where it's not that you're shoving people away from that single seat at the table,
Hmm.
are those labels necessary
Hmm.
as the sort of industry goes forward and there's more of us who are making it to positions of power and places where we can actually hold those levers of power and finance? Do those
Yeah.
labels matter in the same way anymore, or do they maybe matter more?
I think they matter in Hollywood. I think it depends industry to industry. I think to me, and this I can just speak to my Hollywood experience, most of Hollywood is still run by white people.
Yeah.
And so I think where the labels are helpful is there's organizations and stuff and places for groups to gather. And the hope is that in that you will uplift each other. And that's the best case scenario with those things. And Zarna, for example, who we're in this new movie together, Nice Indian Boy, we met because of a South Asians in Hollywood event. We just happened to be in the same room. We started talking, we exchanged numbers, and we didn't end up working together till 2 years later on this movie. But that one small connection happened because we were in that room, because these people organized this organization called the Salon, organized that. So I think little things like that, we do need the help. And what's interesting is I feel like in a majority industry that's not diverse in the people of power, that kind of socializing is happening in the office halls, in the agency halls. It's just happening because people are going to each other's Thanksgiving, and there's just so much mobility and so many deals and stuff are made in these exclusive venues that you aren't invited to. So even though they're not calling it organizing for white people, there is a natural social hierarchy that's happening. People are
Yeah.
rubbing shoulders at big premieres because they're invited to, you know what I mean? So I think that stuff is weirdly powerful, and a lot of decisions are made in those settings. And so in a way, I'm all for minority groups organizing those organizations because we have to do it for ourselves because we're too disparate in many ways. But I do think in our industry, it is helpful still to do that. I think where it can be really tricky is, and this happened a lot in the last few years, is there's this feeling of like, oh, the door is a little bit open, so we want to make stuff for ourselves. And what ends up sometimes happening is we make stuff that's so centered in our identity that it actually isn't entertaining. It feels a little
Mm,
bit more like we're trying to like be righteous. And what
yeah.
happens is that's great for people within your community to watch, but I think ultimately what really breaks through is when people watch something that's not about people that look like them. As Indian person in India watching Hollywood movies, I did that all the time. I only watched white people and I fell into their worlds and I found them. And that's why I had such reverence for them when I came out to, you know what I mean, to America. And I think that's the power of movies, is like it can humanize things that you actually went into not knowing much about a different person's perspective. And it shows you how many things we have in common and how many we have different. And it just helps with all of that so much. And so I think in order to do that, you have to make something really entertaining and you have to
Mm.
think about all audiences, not just South Asian people really get this joke or they'll love this thing. And I think it's great. And it makes sense in the beginning of any movement to focus a lot on the specificities of that. Cause it's like, can you believe in a movie we're getting to say this or show this or whatever? But I think ultimately for those projects to really pop off in a way and have an impact, they have to ultimately be entertaining to everyone. And I think now we're beginning to do that a little bit more.
Hmm.
There was like this study on how Will and Grace is the reason why gay marriage was legalized in America years later, because over 8, 9 seasons of that show, it normalized same-sex relationships to it became a not as political issue. And that to me is like so interesting. But I never watched Will and Grace as homework, as like, this is important television. I watched it because it made me laugh and it
Because
was really
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
And I think that's the ultimate thing. People are wanting to watch film and TV as, or I am, to be entertained. Want to watch a documentary to learn something. And so I think that's the only issue that I've noticed with these groups coming together and the labels, is that there's this feeling of like we need to make stuff for ourselves. And that's good too. But if it doesn't do well and doesn't succeed or cross over the aisle to other people watching it, then in a way you're just creating it in this very small vacuum. And it's maybe not having the desired effect.
I love that it shouldn't ever be homework. In the end,
Yes.
if it's entertainment, then that's probably the most critical thing. And speaking of the entertainment part, I mean, I think your movie, A Nice Indian Boy,
Yeah.
definitely sort of speaks to that, right? That there's a
Yeah, we really tried to do
universality.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was reading a New York Times review where they were sharing that your character, Naveen, in A Nice Indian Boy, sort of emerges. He emerges as a quiet but powerful authority on true love.
Mm.
And I think what struck me about that one, about that, just that statement, and in thinking about the role, is I'm curious how you felt that this film empowered you. I mean, did you
Yeah.
feel that there was a sense of empowerment for you, both personally and professionally, at this stage in your career and at this stage in your life? Was there sort of a sense of empowerment that spoke to you, especially after leaving that project?
Yeah, 100%. It felt like almost too good to be true. One of those projects where
Yeah.
it had so much. I got to, with my partner Roshan, work on the script and write some of this, rewrite some of what was originally there. The original screenplay is by Eric Randall, but we got to make it personal to ourselves a little bit too. So we both poured so much of ourselves into the movie. But essentially, the movie to me was always like, I wish when we were making it, I was like, what I want to make is something that I wish I had when I was 19 years old to show my
Hmm.
parents. That's the age
Yeah.
I came out to them, because I think it would have made the whole thing go much better than it did. And
Right.
I think what's so interesting, and Roshan says this, and he originally said it, and it's really stuck with me, is that so much of queer cinema, film, and TV is about trauma. And I think a lot is true for African American films and TV too. So much of it is about the original sin, the trauma, that you want to see people in those groups just live their life and have fun and be happy and have a
Mm.
happy ending as well.
Yeah.
You don't want to just see that. And so I think when my parents originally, I told them, they just went to the images and things that they were seeing, which was AIDS, which was loneliness. And this movie is a celebration. It's not all of that. It's like, what if everything did work out and you had the big happy ending at the end? And that felt like making something really kind of special and unique. And then also on a separate note, professionally, at a certain point, working all these years, this becomes like any other job, which is that, there's one thing which is the result of your work, but the majority of the experience is, what is the day to day of my job like? Did I enjoy work today? Who
Yeah.
cares what the final movie of people enjoy? Because
Right.
that's not in your control. So it really becomes about the day to day grind of like, was I happy today? Did I like have a great day at work? And the things that excite me now, as much as it's the character and the work, is also the idea of like sometimes getting the chance to be in the leadership position. So on this movie, it's called First on the Call Sheet, but you're basically the actor who's in every day and doing everything. And I don't want to do that all the time. It's a lot of work. But on the projects where it feels really right, it's that feeling of like, I've seen sets be run poorly and well, and I want to do it in a way where I can have a good time. Everyone can be happy. Like, I really care about that environment because I think it brings out the best in everyone. And once in a while, I like the challenge of being like, okay, I'm going to be in every day. I want to set a certain tone. I want that. And so this project gave a lot of that as well. Like, I had to pour every part of myself into it, physically, emotionally, everything. So that stuff feels very, very satisfying. And then the other thing that didn't dawn on me until after we finished was, when I first started in Hollywood, I think someone was trying to be well meaning, but it came off maybe not as well meaning. But they said to me, you have two strikes against you. And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, you're Indian and you're gay. You can't have two things against you. And so then I was like, well, I can't change the way I look. So I guess I'll just bury the gay part of me and I'll just like lean into the Indian part. And then
Yeah.
depending on different jobs, what they require, I'll bring one of the other parts in more or less. But this job specifically required both those parts of myself to be present at all times.
Mm.
And I didn't have
Yeah.
to suppress or hide any of it. Both actually added every day to the scene, to whatever we were doing. Both were valid. And that was a very liberating and free experience to be like, oh my God, everything that's coming out of me is useful and helpful for this particular project. It's all good.
What was something new that maybe you learned about Roshan from working on this project?
Yeah. Yeah, that was this was also so special working with him on this because he came out later in life in his 30s. And in many ways, the story was more raw for him because of the same things I went through when I was 19, which is just, I would say, the fear of the parents, of like their pure fear of like what they think your life is going to look like and them having to readjust their expectations. It was so much more raw for him because it was only 4 or 5 years prior to us filming a lot of these scenes. And
Yeah.
so I think for him, it was more just, it was very healing, I think, to see him kind of process a lot of that stuff and go through a lot of that stuff. And in a way, I think like I had so much more distance from it, from a lot of those
Mm.
feelings, but I
Yeah.
was just, again, just proud of him and admired that he was tackling a lot of those things that were still quite raw. And then the other thing that's really interesting is he knows me so well. So he, in a way, knows when I'm maybe overacting or not being real as much. And he's very blunt, which I like. So he'll sort
Yeah.
of just be like, that didn't feel real. And then I'll just be like, right, right, right. Because you know me so well. And so
Yeah.
in a way, I was proud of my performance too, because I think he kept me honest in moments where I was maybe veering into like more kind of like, acting with a capital A or whatever. And for me also, this was a hard role because the character is very internal and he doesn't express his feelings till the very end, and that's a big struggle in the movie. And so a lot of it is like said through the eyes, and that's a joy for an actor on film to get to sort of play with. But it did
Mm.
make me feel very insecure while filming a lot of it, because many days I would leave and be like, did I do anything today? Like,
Right.
it felt
Right.
like nothing happened. But
Yeah.
he will not move on until he's gotten what he wants, and he's very confident. So him constantly being like, we got it. If it was a director I hadn't worked with, I think it would have been a more torturous experience on this movie, because I've been like, do I trust their taste? Did they really get it? And so there was a lot going on with this one.
And that sounds very helpful to sort of level set with you and really counterbalance how you feel at the end of the day with someone who they know you really well, and they can actually do the little bit more of the reassurance that things are
Yeah.
moving in the right direction or not. And I guess as an unexpected surprise, as you've finished this project and have moved on to others and more that are coming down the pipeline for you, was this additive in that way, so that like now the future roles that you're on, again, you're sort of taking this away and finding that this success actually is only additive to the next projects, and with
Yeah.
that in mind, that like each project is that gamble, and you take
Yeah.
some risk.
Totally. Yeah. This one felt like, I think not every job feels like this, but certain jobs you feel like you took one level up, like you found a new kind of place to
Yeah.
be at. And this one luckily did feel like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because as a person of color in Hollywood, you often get cast in the character parts, which I love.
Yeah.
which are often like showier, louder. The characters are saying what they're feeling. They're kind of like the best friend or whatever, which they're so fun to play.
Yeah.
But there's not maybe as much always, or you have to find that a little bit more. But usually the lead sort of parts, the struggle, and there's more to kind of play off of the backstory and stuff. And in this one particular, the character not speaking as much, but like conveying everything was something I hadn't really done in a movie. And so doing it and trying it and being like, I don't know if it's going to work or if I'll be good at this. And then seeing it and being like, oh, I think I did do a good job with this, gave me this feeling of like, oh, I think I'm ready to do that. And what's interesting about playing this part is that I wouldn't have been able to do it the same way even 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I
Yeah.
think so much of it comes from confidence and trusting that the camera will pick up what you feel, and actually confidence and stillness and being quiet. And I think it's so true for like leaders and other people. They often don't speak a lot. They are always listening or absorbing. And when they do, it feels interesting and you're leaning in. It required a little bit of that. It required everyone else in a weird way on the day to shine around me and get the laughs and get the things, and know that I'm being honest and true to this character, which is that you will hopefully see a version of yourself in this person who is like very shy, very quiet. And by the end, when he isn't that way, you get the payoff of like, oh my God, he's really come and gone on this journey. But it requires a certain level of confidence on the day to not be like, I want to improvise and I want to goof off and I want to have fun and I want to do all this stuff. And in a way, it's like you're trying not to betray yourself for that little pleasure in that moment for the big reward at the end, which is to have hopefully created a character where he's gone on this bigger journey. And I think pulling that off, I didn't know honestly if I had, even though Roshan was saying he was happy with the pieces, I was like, I don't know. And after seeing it, I was like, okay, I know that I can do this now. And like, I've developed that. And so it's given me a little bit, definitely more confidence and other stuff moving forward.
I've talked to others where these kinds of projects, they seem to serve sort of a dual role as being an anchor for having that foundation of something you can do, and also a buoy, right? That it sort of lifts you up and now gives you great optimism for the future. And let me get you out of here on this.
Yes.
I know that people are learning more about you and certainly getting to revisit your work in some ways as well. But for those who might be catching your work for the very first time, or even meeting you for the first time, what do you hope they are taking away from those sort of first experiences?
That's so interesting. Well, my number one thing that comes to my mind is I hope they laugh, because I've been on a lot of comedies. And the other thing I guess I would say is depending on who they are, like I hope what we were saying earlier, which like if they haven't seen an Indian person in film or TV or something, I hope they're getting like a version of it where they feel like, oh, I like that guy. Like in a way, just as small as that seems, where you go like, it's the Will and Grace thing of like normalizing maybe a certain thing that you've seen. Like, to me, that was the magic of honestly being part of the Marvel world with Spider-Man and Deadpool, was that so many non-Indian people watch that in parts of America where they may not have even interacted with the Indian person. And they're like, hey, I like you. And they would high five me or something. And I'd be like, this is just a quiet thing that's happening, where it's like putting out a good version of something. I'm really in this mindset where I want to put out things that make people feel kind and better about the world.
Yeah.
Even this serial killer movie or whatever that I did, at the core of it, the character's so deeply sad and broken. He's not evil. And that's something that was very important to me. I'm like, he's doing really bad things, but deep down, he's just like a broken person who takes it too far. But you hopefully feel bad for him even at the end. I feel like we're in such a time where there's just a lack of kindness and a quick judgment of things. But I feel like I'm not interested in fueling that fire more. I want to make people feel like good and better and lean to that other part of ourselves. And so that's the other thing I guess I would say.
Well, making people feel good and better. And I know lots and lots of folks who are seeing your work, feeling very much better for it, and hopefully thinking to themselves like, hey, that's a good guy there.
Yeah. That one's not a terrorist.
That's right. Yeah.
I would hang out with that one. Maybe he's not a terrorist. Yeah.
Karan, thank you so much for joining. This was really a
Yeah.
treat, and I hope we can visit with you again down the road.
Of course, you have a very calming presence.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I would happily share my blood work with you.
There you go. Right? It's all about the blood work.
One of the first things Roshan on, I think one of our early dates, he was like, I would like to see your lipid panel. And he did. He got in there and
There
he
you go.
liked some stuff and he did not like some stuff. And we've gotten the numbers good now, but it was a very, very jarring experience for me.
Oh my
To
God.
be like, this is very vulnerable to show you these numbers right now.
Well, this was great. Really appreciate the time. And again, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Stay tuned.